We're here in Vienna at the AIDS 2010 with Paul DeLay, who is the Deputy Director of the UN AIDS Program. I'm so pleased that you took the time to visit with us.
What we're seeing, what we're hearing in this conference is some success stories in some of the hardest hit countries, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa. For the last 5 years, there have been intensive prevention efforts, and we've been tracking young people, 15 to 24 years of age, to look at the number of new infections. In 15 of those 30 countries, we're seeing a greater than 25% decline in new infections.
Maybe you can present some of that what we can do as people who are in this dilemma, that are scratching our heads right now.
I think everyone can play a role in fighting this epidemic. And that can be a personal role if they are engaged in risk behavior or they know someone who's engaged in risk behavior, to caution them, to provide information as far as how one can protect themselves. So there's that personal side of it. From the political standpoint, I think there's two big areas where we need work. We continue to need finances. We continue to need resources to combat this epidemic. This year, we estimate that about $16 billion US was used to combat the AIDS epidemic all over the world. We calculate that we need about $26 billion to actually be able to increase the number of people on treatment and to have more effective prevention programs. But the heart of the biggest issue, and the one that's the political one, is human rights. This epidemic, more than any other infectious disease epidemic, is controlled by, is blocked by lack of access to human rights. And until we can overcome that, and the stigma and the discrimination, the wave of punitive laws that are sweeping across all of the continents on the globe, we will never be able to conquer this epidemic.
So is there anything that we can do internationally, or is that you're doing, that we can support within the countries?
We need political leadership. We need champions at the highest level to continue the messages that AIDS is still with us. This epidemic is not over. We don't have enough resources to sufficiently fight it. And the core of it is a human rights issue. And the human rights not only will positively affect responding to the AIDS epidemic, but it'll affect a lot of other aspects of lives for people, particularly in low-income countries, low-resource settings.
Is there anything we can do there that might encourage our government to become more of a leader than where they have? Do you feel that's appropriate?
I think there's a number of areas. Finances is one of them. Even because of the economic crisis, we've seen a number of donors reduce their contributions. The U.S. has actually increased theirs. It's not a big increase, but it's still an increase, and that sends a positive message to all the other donor countries in the world. The other thing we're now seeing in the U.S. is the willingness to confront this epidemic head on, and particularly in the really sensitive parts of this epidemic, really focusing on men who have sex with men, and focusing on the most effective way of dealing with injecting drug use transmission, and that's harm reduction. So we've seen a turnaround from the U.S. government as far as its policies, particularly surrounding harm reduction, and that's a very good sign.
And while we're speaking, there's a press conference going on at the very moment that we have someone in taping.
Good.
Regarding the harm reduction. So all of these are components that are very important. We probably haven't covered them all. We need to say that so that someone doesn't say, oh, you forgot this. But is there anything else you'd care to impart? Because I know that there will be a time where we may visit with you again and we'll ask you, how did things go?
I think if we look back at this conference, there's a couple of things that I'm taking away from it. This is probably the most powerful focus on the human rights agenda that I've seen in these conferences. And that's important because I think we tend to forget it. It's tough to deal with. We recognize that. And it goes way beyond what we do in medical settings, health facilities. So that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's exciting breakthroughs showing that traditional prevention works. And we can prove it, we can duplicate it, we can scale it up. The other exciting finding coming out of this is the very exciting news about this new microbicide that contains an antiretroviral drug, where it looks like it's effective in protecting women from infection. It still needs another couple of years of development, but I think we need to stay tuned and watch that closely and try to get that research done as quickly as we can and then get that product out so that people can use it.
Well, it was a real win. I think that's why the applause, and
Yeah.
people really needed that.
Yeah,
They needed
it's a
that.
shot in the arm for the whole AIDS response.
Yeah. But just as a theme of the conference, rights now. Rights now.
Rights,
Right now.
yeah. Rights
So
here, rights now.
Rights here, right now.
Yeah.
I'm so hopeful that we have an opportunity to talk with you again and we can say, yes, there was improvement.